Good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for coming to this session of the Warrant Committee. We have an agenda that's pretty full, so I would like to begin by reviewing and accepting the meeting minutes for February 10th and 12th, 5th, 10th, and 12th, which you all received electronically. Are there any changes or amendments to any of those meeting minutes that anybody has at this time?
No.
None heard. Chair will entertain a motion to accept those three meeting minutes as presented. You have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? No? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Mike Zulis, our chair of our select board, and Mike Denny here, our town administrator, are here to give us an update on the budget for this year that we're reviewing now and shortly going to recommend and vote on. So gentlemen, thank you very much for coming. We appreciate all the work that you've done so far.
Oh, thank you for having us.
Oh, it's great to
Thank
have
you.
All right, so first, the update on the budget. It's more of a general update at this point. I think it's fair to say, based on the discussions that that have been had with school administration and the town administration at this point, that there is a path to resolving the $450,000 deficit between both the town and the schools. So that's one bucket. I look at it in two buckets. One, you get that $450,000 level service deficit, and I think we have a path to resolving that. Second bucket is the $679,000 that the schools have requested above level service, largely, as I understand it, driven by increases in enrollment. That is not resolved. The process for trying to resolve that over the next week is as follows. My understanding, and the chair of the school committee has told me that the school committee, finance committee is going to meet on Wednesday morning. They're going to try to work that number as best they can and do their best to prioritize the line items in that number, and also to see if they can work that number down as best they can. Yep.
Mike, do you want to give us a little bit of background on precisely what's included in that number that we're going to have to play with?
Yeah, as I understand it, and
Are
this
they
is
all
from
positions?
this is from memory. There are 16 positions, and I think there's a bus as well. That's my memory. And there may be some other smaller ancillary items, but the large ticket items are really the 16 positions, as I understand it. And so their finance committee is meeting Wednesday morning. They will hopefully vote at that time on a list of priorities in that 679, and perhaps they can work on getting that number down a bit. The school committee will then consider it and vote on it on Wednesday evening.
Yep.
And then the finance committee of the select board and the finance committee of the school committee will meet Friday morning to try to come to ground on how we resolve that number. So that's the process. I think, Mike, is that fair?
Correct, yeah. I did, just to add a little bit, I think part of that needs, all of the needs-based requests are in the packet that the school committee provided for each of you. It's in there, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's my understanding as well, a portion of it is to add some transportation to the budget. There was some concern this year that some students were left out. So I know the school committee was addressing that in their needs-based.
As you seek balance, where do you think you're going to get, where are you going to take from to provide whatever is being required? Whatever number comes up from the school committee, they reduce it to, has to come from something else, obviously. Where's the give?
So usually on the town side, it's the larger budgets. It's police, fire, and public works. That's where we usually look towards it. We've had preliminary conversations with each of those department heads. When we talked, the last time I was here, I talked about throwing level service -3 out the window.
Yeah.
I think we're still there.
Yes.
But some of the level service budgets can't sustain operations. The clerk's office, the assessor's office, the treasurer's office, they're at bare minimum. So if you start cutting them to make up the town side portion of the shortfall, you're looking at people, and we need people to run these offices. So that's not something. And in my history of putting budgets together in the last 25 years, usually it comes from your large departments, and, you know, if that 450 number is the number, I certainly find $225,000 somewhere in police, fire, or DPW.
So from a technical and a logistical perspective, we need to approve those changes in the budgets that are going to be submitted for the individual warrant articles for the different departments. So the numbers that we look at should be pretty clean, so we can vote on them, rather than
Yes.
having X meetings and being jammed up against the wall, as we unfortunately have in a couple of years past. Trying to avoid that, I guess the question is going to be, how quickly can this be done? When can we see the final number of where these budgets are going to be tinkered? And as we kind of weave this together, the final numbers for the different budgets are going to be important for us to see. So I guess in order for us to have the flexibility to look at these and to understand them so that we can make the proper recommendation to the town meeting, I guess I'm asking when we'll be able to see them and when we'll have a good, clean number for all of the departments finally.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll know more Friday morning. The question is how successful the groups will be on Friday morning.
So theoretically, that happens, would we be able to have a clean copy for everybody to see Monday? So when we vote,
If
I would
there's-
like to have the vote on this by Monday next, by the March 2nd, because we have a whole schedule that we have to effectively get through to get this to the printer by the 13th.
I think if the groups are now instructed that it would be very helpful for the warrant committee to have this by Monday night, that may help in the negotiations. I hope
I
it
would
will.
even move
Oh, we
beyond,
need that before then.
I'd need beyond helpful, I'd say essential. Because if we see it, even if we have it Monday afternoon so we can review it, that would be a help. If it's planked in front of us Monday at 7, that's not
It's too
gonna
late.
really work for us.
Well, no, I mean, you'll have whatever results from Friday morning, I assume you can have by late Friday or
Right.
certainly
If you
first
can
thing
manage
Monday.
that, that would be the
Yeah.
best of all possible worlds. That would be really terrific.
Yeah, so the town accountant is involved in all these
Okay.
meetings.
So Amy can get this up, move
yeah.
that to us.
Unfortunately, she's only on version 6 of the budget this year. Last year, we were on about 56
Yeah,
this time of
exactly
year.
right, but she's a pro at this, so
Right.
she's used to it, and we know the
Yeah,
MO.
she has
So-
that extra column loaded and ready.
And she doesn't like
ready
to
go.
sleep anyway, so this is a good thing. So after a fashion, if we can have that as quickly as you can manage to have it, then we can move along with it, because we don't want to be the stop in the cork in the bottle here.
Can I ask
Any
a
questions?
I have a question about the bus. When they were here, when the school was here, I asked them about it, and I asked if there was something that we could do as a town to get the bus and then utilize it from other departments, so it wasn't just coming from the school budget. Has that been, and I even asked Chase about it, has that been discussed at all?
I had a brief discussion with Glenn about buses. There's a
Yeah.
community to our south, I want to say it might be Randolph, that owns their own buses. And I think the
think you're right.
maintenance of those buses is costing them more than they thought.
So it's not an ideal situation.
Correct. Understanding also that the competitiveness of the bids, and this is my understanding of that world, I'm not in that world, is that it's not a very competitive bid process. There's only a couple of companies that provide buses.
So, is there a chance for us to get another bus? Because there was a lot of families, a lot of kids that were left off the buses, that were there by the deadline. So, there's a lot of unhappy people that I'm hearing from on the school side.
Right, and I can qualify it by saying the school committee understood that
Okay,
and made it part of their needs base, because we gave them 2 directives, level service and level service -3. They felt the need to put this needs-based level service budget forward, and it was a priority of theirs.
perfect, thank you so
Yes.
much.
Any other questions?
No, maybe just a concern. I mean, I looked at the fire and the police department budget, and they didn't look like there was a lot of excess in there. They've done without a lot of things. You know, I think this year the big thing, and I think in both of them, was the overtime, and that had to
Right.
do, or the buybacks, and that had to do with retirement, so I'm.
Contractually,
Good
we're
luck
there.
in finding
Right.
it, but I just,
Yeah.
I feel.
Yeah, no, I agree, and it's always a struggle, and if either of the chiefs were here, they would, talk to you about some of the level service stuff of
Yeah.
Chief King has testified many times that it's not public safety issues, but it's sending an officer to a public meeting, it's sending an officer to a training, it's things like that, where, he would never shortfall the community when it comes to public safety issues,
Right.
but you might not see a police officer at a neighborhood meeting, or things like that, where that cost can add up quickly under the collective bargaining agreements.
And then
Okay.
just maybe one other question.
Yeah, please.
Is there any movement on the pilot initiative?
No. I mean, beyond Milton Academy's increase, increase this year, nothing.
This board may not be aware of the letter that we received.
Oh,
About 3 weeks
oh, I
ago.
thought they had,
Right.
oh, okay, so
Yeah.
you want, yeah, so we did, you mean from Milton Academy?
Milton Academy.
So Milton Academy increased their amount, I'm sorry, I thought you were aware of that. Milton Academy
No, no.
increased their amount, it was from 140,000 to 160,000.
162.5.
Yeah, 162.5, and then in addition, they had some amounts for the youth center, for public safety, separate grants of
Correct.
7,500 apiece, and then there was one more for 15,000, and I can't
So
recall
it was
what that
police
amount is.
10,000, fire 10,000, and the youth teen center 7,500.
Okay.
Up from 5,000. Yep.
Right.
In addition to the 162.5.
Yes.
Correct.
Which was 140 for fiscal year
Right.
20.
Can we
Correct.
see the letters? Excuse me.
Yeah, yep.
Sorry, was that also we may have been informed of that, was that also the letter where they informed us that certain properties were going to be taken off the tax rolls, they were?
No,
Previous
this
No,
letter,
letter.
no, that
This
was.
Okay,
letter
no,
came
that was-
in-
Just didn't want to get them confused.
this letter came in after I
Okay.
testified the last
Yeah,
time
yeah,
here.
this one we
This
haven't
letter's
seen.
So this
10,
is in
12 days
addition to
old.
that, okay.
Right.
Yes.
We're
Yeah.
making progress, I think that's.
No, that's
Yeah.
good,
helpful.
so it's not,
We're not
yeah,
there yet, but
just
we're
making
making
it
progress.
clear.
Okay.
Do kids, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, do kids from the Milton Academy use the youth center?
It's kids that go to school in Milton or live in Milton.
Yeah, so they're allowed.
they do? Oh,
They're
that's-
allowed.
Absolutely.
That's great to know, I
Yeah.
just
They
didn't
go to
realize
peers,
that.
yeah.
St. Mary's, St. Agatha's.
Yeah, they're allowed
Town
to.
residents, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Okay, any other questions with respect to that? Mike, do you have anything else you want to share with us about the non-budget articles?
Well, I can go through some of the non-budget.
If you have
items
time,
If you want,
if you have
yeah, I mean,
time, yeah.
and I appreciate your accommodation. I have a 7:35
Yeah.
stop, and then I can come back
If needed. but
around
I-
8 o'clock, but.
You're an efficient guy, and we trust that you'll
well,
move through it.
Yeah, but there's a number, so I don't want to short-circuit any discussion. So then, I'm hoping that you have the same numbering scheme that I have, and maybe we can work through that here for the non-budget articles. I start at number 34. Do you have that list?
No,
We
we
don't.
only have the actual.
They only have the
Yeah,
actual
actual
articles.
articles.
Okay, so Lynn, what's the best way to go through these? Is it to go through in the order that you received them from Hillary, or
I would
does it
just try
matter?
to talk to them with the title that. we-
Right.
The title.
Title
Okay.
will do.
All right, so
There's
let's,
there's 8 of
General
them.
subject we could find in the.
That you-
that
Correct.
sounds right, yeah.
That's
that
correct,
sounds
yeah.
right. Okay.
Okay. Go
All
ahead.
right, not including the planning board
Planning
articles.
board, yeah. Lynn, yeah, Cheryl already did a great job for us.
Yep, so the first one is the PEG access and cable-related fund appropriation. Last year, town meeting created a fund for those amounts that the town receives from Comcast and RCN from the cable license. And there's somewhere in the area of 400,000, 500,000
Correct.
in that fund. This article, which would allow an annual appropriation from that fund. We don't know if there's an appropriation needed this year from that fund, but this would allow that appropriation. And the idea from town council is that this should be an annual article in the event that there is an appropriation needed from this fund to enhance the cable access and the production throughout town. So,
Okay.
Could I just add one thing to that,
yeah,
Mr. Chair?
yeah.
This does not come from tax dollars. This is revenue received from Comcast or RCN as a part of the agreement
Right.
with them. It's hard to forecast we get a percentage of their sales,
Right.
so we don't know that number going forward. So the idea is, and Mass General Law has set up this.
But it's available if needed.
Yes, and that's how the Milton Access TV draws off the funds from the town.
Can I ask
Okay.
a quick question,
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair? Has anybody discussed about having an internship program, like in the summertime, for the students that are in TV production at the high school to actually work at Milton Access TV?
They do.
That's
Sarah
fascinating.
Troeg from the library, her son Daniel worked last year.
That's fascinating because I would like to discuss that offline.
Okay.
Because multiple kids I know have gone to them asking, females have gone to them asking for internships, and it has not been well-received. So I would just like to say that that's something that we should look at as a town to continue on the education piece of that from the high school, so that they actually have some experience within the
Sure.
town limits.
And we
Yeah.
can certainly encourage that. They are a private nonprofit.
They are?
And so we're not, the town doesn't dictate
I
what they
understand
do,
that.
but we can certainly encourage that.
Equal opportunity.
Absolutely.
Okay, next.
Next, let's see, affordable housing, stormwater,
Stormwater.
Article 39. This is a long article, and this relates to the permit issued by the EPA, the Massachusetts Municipal Separate Stormwater Permit that the EPA has issued. That permit requires regulatory changes to the bylaws governing stormwater. And those two changes in that long article you have, they boil down to two things. One is an update for enforcement to eliminate illicit discharges, sources of pollution. And two is more stringent control of construction sites. So these bylaws, add to what we can use our stormwater funding for. And this is in order to comply with the EPA permit that the town has. And those regulatory changes, as I understand it, need to be made by June 30th, 2020. And so that's why we have them in the warrant for this year.
Got it.
So anything more beyond that, frankly, I would advise you to talk to Chase, because he's really an expert on this, but.
You
Mike,
gave me
might have-
some brief comments to talk about it, and to the chair's second point about construction sites, that's where most of your runoff comes from, the illegal runoff. The illicit stuff that the town would proactively be looking for, and it comes from sampling bodies of water around town.
Oh, yeah.
Is a lot of people may or may not know that their sewer pipe is tied into the storm drains in town, which is not legal, right, and creates pollutants. This stormwater article was written by the former town environmental coordinator, who now sits in the select board office, Hillary Waite, and they work very closely with the New England, the Neponset Watershed Association, who are subject matter experts in this. So this is kind of to tighten up an enforcement piece of where stormwater is coming from and trying to clean up.
Okay,
I have a question. On the June 30th date, let's say town meeting votes this down, what's the consequence? Is there a fine? Is the town assessed a fine? Like, what happens?
I'm not sure.
I mean, I think my understanding is that our permit will be out of compliance with the permit,
Yeah,
if we don't have that as part of our bylaws.
And then the permit's revoked?
Now, what the remedy
Right.
is, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what the remedy is, but we would be out of compliance. Now, that's a
Is there
question.
a daily fine for being out of
That's what
compliance?
we need to find out,
Right.
yeah. So my guess is that it's not a monetary
Okay, cool.
situation, but that's something we'll need to find out.
If the permit's revoked, you're not allowed to collect the stormwater fee?
a lot of people would like.
No, I don't think that's the case, Doug, but nice try.
We should
I think town meeting might be interested in that.
definitely, which
Yeah,
is one
sure.
reason why I think we need that piece of information.
Yeah.
So we can get
Sure,
that.
sure.
It'd be very valuable.
Very relevant.
Okay.
Next one is the Community Preservation Act.
Right.
So,
Anything else?
yeah, let me just,
Allison's here to
why
talk
don't I
about
just
that.
give a quick, I'll just give a quick one, and then I'll go through, I'll
Sure.
finish, go through, and then Allison can give you more on the Community Preservation Act after I'm
Yep.
gonna have to step
Yes,
out in
of
about
course.
10 minutes.
Right.
So Allison will tell you more about this, but the CPA was created about 20 years ago. Paul Salucci signed it into law. What the CPA is the recording fees from the local registry of deeds from house transactions are created in a fund. And that fund is distributed to communities that have enacted the Community Preservation Act, which applies a 1 to 3% surcharge or tax on the residents of the town. And then the town gets a match. It's not a 100% match, but given the fact that 176 communities have enacted the CPA, that match has now been recently increased by the legislature. So what we could expect for a match is about 30 to 35%, as I understand it. Every community around Milton has enacted the CPA, except for Dedham. And the CPA allows you to use those funds for historic preservation, affordable housing, and open spaces, parks, et cetera. My editorial comment, this is not from the select board, but my editorial comment is, I see this as a mechanism to help fund fire stations, because at least 2 of our fire stations are historic buildings. So to the extent that we have a CPA in place, we collect that tax, we get the match from the state, those are funds that we can use to help pay for our fire stations. Now, one other thing about this tax is, unlike any other tax or unlike any other debt exclusion, you can exclude from this low-income residents and low to moderate income seniors. And you can't do that with an override, and you can't do it with a debt exclusion. So those are the characteristics of the CPA tax. The select board didn't vote to approve this, but I think the general sense of the board was support for 1%. The lowest amount that would get us in the door, as opposed to anything higher than that, in order so that we can get to the point where we can access some of the matching funds, and that we can collect some funds where we don't burden unnecessarily low to moderate income seniors.
Question, 1% of what? 1% of the residential tax base?
Correct.
So
Correct.
1% of 78 million or thereabouts, or I'm sorry, 83 million. So.
About 700,000,
Right.
so if your match is about 245 to 300, then you're gonna collect,
About
900 to $1 million.
Okay.
Right. Chris?
It's just a question, so, and maybe I just need a tax lawyer for this, but, it's surprising, so I'm putting myself in the position of somebody in town meeting who's saying, normally with an override, you have to have a townwide vote.
Right.
Here, you just have to have a meeting, no?
No, actually not.
No, is that- okay. Maybe I misread
The
this.
article is to put the CPA before the voters
Oh, I see.
in November.
Got it.
So it's not, so it's not to approve it, it's basically to put it
To
to the voters
referendum.
for an up or
Thank you
down.
for that, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't make that.
No,
clear.
I
No, that's
probably
fine.
didn't read it clearly.
You got it. Okay, do you have time to keep going?
Yeah. Prudent investor. We had this as an article last year.
Yep.
Now you have 2 options before you. One is the prudent investor rule that is open-ended, that would allow the investment of town funds in accordance with town policies. And if you had town policies in effect, you could put in the policies a targeted allocation for investment. And the other is to limit the investment of town funds to the S&P 100. And there was some discussion last year of this, so it's now back before you and back before town meeting. The idea of this is to give the town some flexibility, rather than restricting it to the Mass General Laws list, which is about 10 to 20, as I understand it, equities. So you're really limited in how you can invest your funds, which doesn't, some people might say, isn't the best thing for diversification, and may not be the best way to grow your money. So this is something that the treasurer and our investment advisor have suggested, that they think makes sense, and the select board has not taken a position, but puts it, at this point, but puts it before the warrant committee for inclusion in the warrant.
If I might add?
Yeah, please.
There are 5 communities that currently have this in effect.
S&P 100.
The prudent investor list, yes.
Right, okay. And do they
Newton-
define it this way also?
Some do, some don't. Some are more, they
Broader.
don't, yeah, more, they can draw from a broader list of
Right.
equities. Newton, Brookline, Northampton, Sterling, and Peabody. Cohasset approved it at town meeting in April. It's at the legislature. They haven't heard back yet. What they did here is that it doesn't apply to stabilization funds, only trust funds. Right, so the stabilization in funds in town cannot be invested this way. It's only for trust funds.
Okay, Chris?
And I'm sorry, we're talking about, because I'm looking at a document with option 1 and option 2. We're talking about option 2?
Well, the select board, we voted to send them both to you.
Okay.
The first option allows investment in accordance with town policies, right? And then, that's what I was talking about, the town would have to adopt a policy, perhaps setting forth a targeted allocation.
Yeah.
The second one limits the investment to the S&P 100.
Okay.
And that was really the discussion that we had last year at town meeting.
Right.
So, yeah, so
So
that's,
town policy would have to be defined.
that's
Right.
correct.
So theoretically, we would approve this and say we would invest this money, trust funds, not stabilization, in a policy which has yet to be determined.
Right, there'd have to be a town investment policy.
And how would that be derived?
Who drafts that?
That would be the select board sets the policy, so that would be a select board policy.
Oh,
So we can choose whichever one of these we like more.
That's what the select board sent them both to you, so you can choose whichever one you like. That's my view, you can choose whichever one you like.
okay.
So the legal list consists currently of 22 equities.
22, yeah.
So do we get to pick one that goes to town meeting, or do we,
Well,
or
we-
do we recommend
Or
one,
We have
recommend
included,
not
we
the
have
other one?
included both. So my view is, your recommendation should be, we think this one is better.
We think we pick the first one.
Yes, we recommend you should choose
town
X
meeting, it's-
for Y.
Sagacity could pick
And this
the
will
other one.
generate the discussion, this
Then
may
it's gonna
generate the
It's
discussion.
gonna generate a discussion that's gonna pull us down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, that's gonna
I
be
can guarantee
another
that.
night.
Right.
Can I
I
just
can
ask-
even name you the people who are gonna get up and object to it in
Especially
order.
if they can convince to choose the opposite, the option we don't recommend.
Well, you know, it's like the old Three
Whichever
Stooges
that
line,
may
you may
be.
choose the way in which in
Yes.
which you wish to die. You can have your head chopped off, you can be burned at the stake.
Yeah.
You're dead anyway.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Oh,
what's the
it-
difference?
It's an extra night added on, no matter what.
I think you're just reacting to today's market.
Okay.
Yes.
So
Yes,
my-
but we
that's
know
my
what goes up
question.
comes down.
Who on the select board actually does, I don't know all of your backgrounds or what you do outside of, this wonderful job. Does anybody have a financial background?
Well,
Does
no,
anyone have a
I think the
business
way
background?
this, well.
Good question.
I wouldn't,
Sorry.
I wouldn't bank on the financial background of any of the select board members. My
Okay.
view is that the select board, engaging in its due diligence, would delegate this to its policy committee, and the policy committee would, yes, we do, and the policy committee would engage experts and our investment advisor to see what the best
And does
policy
that
would
have to
be.
come back to us or to the town meeting?
Right.
So it's yours,
It's the select board,
and so the discretion would be with the select board, as with so many other things too.
correct.
Goes to the
And
select
for
board.
clarification, the town treasurer was approached by a resident of town, a female professor at Northeastern, whose expertise is finance, who would like to help. So I would assume that we would
That
reach
makes
out
me
to.
feel so much better
Yes.
just hearing
Well,
that, because I
I
know
just
who that
asked the
person is.
question, having been a practitioner in the investment management business for almost 40 years, do I really want a professor calling this? Or do I want somebody who actually has
Does it.
taken the lumps to make the decisions, whether it's been right or wrong? I'm sorry, I would just go with the practitioner every time.
Yeah, and it has been the several meetings that we've brought Abbey Capital in.
Good,
It-
okay,
it's
as long
their
as you have
philosophy
somebody
as
who's
well.
actually blown it a few times,
Yes.
so they learned something from the mistake, then I'd say, yeah, okay.
Not to go too far into this, but it's
Yeah.
22 equities, only 7 out of 11 investment sectors are representative currently, and none of the FANGs, right? You don't have Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google, you don't have the opportunity to invest in them.
You can't use
currently.
index funds, you can't,
Cannot use index funds.
not currently,
Really?
yeah.
Okay, got it.
All right, carryover and expenditure local option. This is a follow-on to a fund that was established last year to provide for the collection of rents and rental fees. And this article would allow those rental fees to be used in the upkeep of a building or property. And what's driving this really is the Milton Landing and the rents that will be collected from Milton Landing, and to be able to use those fees for the upkeep of the area and the buildings on that area.
This would be put in a separate account.
Correct.
Discrete.
Correct.
That's that revolving fund we already.
Correct.
Yeah, we already
That's
did
right.
that, didn't we?
But this is the ability to then
This
take
is,
that fund.
this is
and
allowed to
source it.
use it. This would allow, we need to have the select board authorized to use this to fix up the properties. That's what this article is. This is the follow-on.
Okay, got it.
But it could apply to, in the future, to any municipal.
Correct. Any rents that
facility,
you get, if there's a rent
any
for a
school
building that's,
anything.
building that was used as a school
Mhm.
for which you're collecting rents, these now will allow those rents to be used for the upkeep of the building.
Okay.
Let's see, article I have is 43, increasing the qualifying gross receipts and reducing the per annum interest rate on taxes owed. This is an article to allow the town to improve the tax deferral deferral program for seniors. There are a few things that we're trying to do for seniors right now, and one of the things that's driving it, at least in my mind, is in our housing production plan, one of the statistics that jumped out to me was poverty among seniors in Milton in 1999 was 4.3%. In 2013, it was 5.5%. In 2017, it was 9.2%. It's nearly doubled in the last 4 years. So this is a problem, right? So this is something that, in my mind, drives the CPA. This is a tax that helps us pay for things, and we can exempt low and moderate income seniors. It drives this, that will hopefully improve and expand our tax deferral program for seniors. And what this article will do, will allow us to increase the level of income for seniors to be able to participate in the program. Right now, the level of income is 56,000. 56,000. 164. In many communities, it's higher. It's 58,000, it's 88,000, it's 84,000. So you can get more seniors involved in this program. Secondly, our interest rate for the tax deferral program is 8%, very high. Very high compared to other communities. In other communities, it's 2%. It's 4%. It's 1.85%. So what we want to do, and what the assessors in particular want to do, is improve this program and get more seniors involved in the program and have a better return for the program. Now, one of the things that you may want to do, this is a suggestion in your analysis, is to determine what impact it's going to have on the budget, because there's going to be a little bit of it's going to be a little less revenue. I don't think it's going to be particularly material, but it's something to consider.
What is the age that's applied?
65.
65.
65.
Is there a way to get an estimate of what the impact could be, like a range at least?
I think Amy can do that.
Yeah, it would be speculative, but it's very unattractive right now.
Yeah.
I think less than 10 people participate in this now.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the other communities are. The chief appraiser of town has sent around his due diligence of other communities. To the chair's point, their threshold for income is higher and their interest rates are lower, and it's more attractive.
My view is that and that all makes sense to me. My view, though, is that the potential budget impacts, I think, are gonna be important for us to make an assessment on.
Particularly as you go forward,
That's
because, I mean, 65 sounds younger the closer I get to it, but I think there are a lot of people who are in that boat, who are making these determinations, can I afford to stay, et cetera, et cetera. So I think this is gonna be a very material item very shortly.
Sorry to keep you,
Yeah,
perhaps
that's
Mr. Denny can answer instead. What's the, I think you said it's 56,000 is the income?
Yes,
Maximum.
that's the maximum. That's the maximum that
So
someone
what would
can.
this change it to? It doesn't set any limit?
It's up to you.
Would that be up to
It's up
us,
to you to
or
make
would
a
it be policy of
recommendation.
the
You can
select
make a
board?
recommendation, or you can have the chief appraiser in here to make a recommendation. We have the statistics for the other communities. Select board hasn't made a recommendation. We could.
Okay.
We could make a recommendation to
I'm
you,
just
but
wondering who would then set that?
it
would it be
it
the
will be
select
set in the
board?
recommendation. It
Okay.
should be set in the recommendation.
Okay.
Town council has recommended that it be set in the recommendation,
Okay.
not in the article itself. So we send you the article, you all make the recommendation. If you want, we can have a vote, I can bring it up with the select board and determine what we think it should be, but you all are probably going to want to do your own analysis, it seems to me.
Yeah, we would need more information.
And,
for
and
that.
you should have, if you don't already, you should have the statistics from the surrounding communities, just so you can get a sense of who's
I
doing
just
what.
got this today. I'll
Yeah.
send
Yeah,
it
we
over.
don't
No,
have
we don't have
any
that.
more
Yeah.
information than that.
Yeah.
We need to talk with you.
It would be helpful to have even as a point of reference, what the thoughts of the select board are. I mean, we can come up with a number, but I mean, this is a very heterogeneous group. It's gonna be all over the place.
So
Not
the-
good with numbers.
Yeah, I can tell you that all right, so we need to come up with, the general sense,
helpful.
the general sense of the select board, I can tell you, is that the interest rate should be lower and the threshold should be higher. That's the general sense of the board, but if you want us to fix on a number, we'll
It's
do
hard to
it.
stick with an 8% interest rate when you have, the 2 and 10-year treasury at 1.25.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
It's
Very
good
hard
that
to
we would be
justify
setting a
that.
number and it's not, say, a policy that can then just change.
Right, that's exactly right.
Year
That's exactly right.
without a vote.
That's exactly
kind of
right.
thing. So,
Um,
Thank you.
Easements, I'm going to jump past easements because I'm going to have to go. Easements is the easement article is really it's a ministerial article. It just gives the select board the right to accept easements on behalf of the town. This I wouldn't think is controversial, but that's for you to decide. Finally, the electronic alternative to the delivery of printed warrants. Our former executive secretary, Jen McCullough, has done a lot of work on this article. It is a cost-saving article. It is an efficiency article. This cost-saving percentage-wise is very high, dollar-wise does not move the needle that much. We're talking about maybe $10,000 or $20,000. But what we're talking about here is printing maybe 500 to 1,000 warrants so that they'd be available to all town meeting members and to anyone who wants it, and available in town hall, and then distributing them electronically to everyone else
To
who
the
wants one.
residents.
And, I'm sorry?
Okay. To the
Uh,
residents?
To the residents, yeah, to anyone who wants it, by email, to anyone who wants it, and it'd be available at town hall, it'd be available at the library. You can get a copy of it, but it would be available here, but it wouldn't be something where we would, it would change our obligations, so we would no longer be obliged to mail them to everyone. And it would save money and make things, could make things more efficient. We have the statistics for you, you'll get that
They
sheet
have
as
that.
well. You
Yeah.
have that. And I think that is it, with the fire building committee and the school building committee articles have been withdrawn.
Yes.
Okay, so that is,
Thank you very much. This has
That's
been
all
very
we have.
helpful. If those
Mr.
pe-
Dennehy, can I just have you say into the microphone what you said about pointing here? That it will also be,
Council.
Yes, yep. Anybody that wants a copy of the warrant, should this article pass, would be available at the library, town hall, and the council on aging,
thank you.
and by request.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. This
All
is
right.
very helpful. If
Thank
we
you.
can get those bits of information, we can
Absolutely.
factor them in and then
Yep.
we'll move with them.
great.
Thank you. Terrific. Thank you very
Thanks for
much.
getting me out of here.
No,
A little late, sorry.
no, we,
Right, you're
5 minutes isn't too
5
bad,
minutes late,
considering the
sorry.
volume of data that we went through. That was pretty good. Okay. Allison, please come and talk to us about the Community Preservation Act. We're very happy to have Allison Quinn come and talk to us in a little more detail about the Community Preservation Act, which is, if everything keeps going the way it is, it'll be Article 40 in the warrant report. So you have 7 minutes.
Sure.
Take it
So
away.
I think Chairman Zulus did a pretty good job of giving you the crux of what CPA is.
Right.
I worked for the Community Preservation Department in Boston for about a year and a half before I came here. So I generally have some background knowledge of all the administration functions of that. But generally, what the numbers would break down to for the people who live in Milton on an average single-family house would be about $6.97 a month.
$6.97 a month.
Correct. And that's assuming that's the average price of a single family, and I don't live here, so I don't know exactly what that spread looks like, if it's like most houses are, 400,000 and they go up to 2 million. I'm not sure how it works, but that's basing it on generally what the average
Right.
cost of a single-family house is. Milton isn't unlike any other town. I know you guys tried once and it didn't pass. That's, I guess, a trend. A lot of other municipalities have tried once and then passed it on the second time. But as Mr. Zulus indicated, it happens in a range of 3 buckets. It's open space, it's affordable housing or community housing, and then historic preservation. And for each funding round, whatever you get in your pool of money, you have to spend at least 10% of that in each one of those buckets. You can set it aside and not spend it in 1 year. You can wait and put it off to a project for the next year, but you are required by state law to put at least 10% in each of those buckets for each funding round.
Could you repeat the 3 buckets, please?
So you have community housing,
Okay.
you have open space or, outdoor space, which can also include, if you wanted to increase your tree canopy, preservation in that sense, and then historic preservation. So like the firehouse, some of the historic buildings, I think Milton Landing has like an old, house down there, projects like that. And I think another cool feature of that is it can be put forward collectively. You can vote on what you want to do. It's kind of managed in-house. It's regulated by the state, but, regular citizens can put forward projects that they think should be included. Residents are allowed to give feedback on projects. I think it allows people to put forward, for example, like Cali Park. I know the high school has like a lower field that's a problem. The only thing it wouldn't be able to fund if you wanted to phase a project like that would be turf. You can pay for it to install turf, you could pay to have it shipped here, but you can't pay for the actual turf itself.
And explain, please, the matching that happens.
So the matching is, they calculate about 30 to 35% on whatever deeds or other registry-related functions are done at a state level. So you're already paying into it. Every municipal agency pays into it in some capacity. You're just not extracting any of that value back. And I know that no one loves taxes, but in this case, if you try it for a year and you don't like it and you want to put it back on the ballot and take it off, you can do that. No one who has adopted it has rescinded community preservation money. I think it becomes like a part of a toolbox of resources for towns that otherwise a project wouldn't get done. They can put aside this money and squirrel it away for a few years, and then when a bigger project comes down the pike, they know that they have the CPA money there.
Is there a requirement to spend it annually?
So I'm not sure. I know that there is an administrative piece. I think you can spend up to like 3% of all of the revenue that you bring in, and that may have to get spent. Another new component is that people are applying this regionally. Down the Cape, I think like Dennis, Yarmouth, and Harwich just started to collaborate on community preservation projects. So they're getting more bang for their buck, especially with affordable housing.
George has a question.
Questions?
Please, Christine.
I'm a little bit confused with regard to current state. I don't, so did anybody else get this letter from, you must have all?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So what do you mean by we participate? What's the, I don't understand where we are, where we're going.
So, right now, the town of Milton, I'm assuming probably somewhere in the $70,000 to $90,000 a year.
95.
So, the state collects fees when you transfer the deed, or you record a deed, those are all recording costs. Every single municipality within Massachusetts pays. That's that extra that they went up. They've done it a couple times now. They've gone up on recording fees. That is set aside for community preservation. Whether your town has adopted it or not, you still have to pay that fee.
Okay. And and then we're moving to, what's the proposal, what's the difference?
So so the town of Milton doesn't get any money in return right now. What this proposal does, and it's part of the Community Preservation Act funding mechanism, is you have to adopt it by ballot. So you have to kind of tap into the resource to get back. So as all of the municipal agencies or towns pay into that registry and it's taken out and put aside for CPA, those that have adopted CPA take a little bit extra out of their tax base, as I just explained, like, $6.97 a month.
Okay.
Everyone who's in a
And then you
CPA
can
does
pull
that.
from it.
And then that money comes back to you with about a 35% matching from the state.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Any other questions?
Can I
Erin,
just,
please.
can I just real quick, not everybody on our committee got this letter. Would it be possible, Lynn, to scan it in or take a photo of it and send it to everybody?
Yeah, who
Because
did not
just-
receive it? I thought, you didn't get
I-
it, really?
Yeah,
Could not understand what.
Oh, I got this, I
What?
just didn't know where the heck I got it.
no,
I didn't know what I got
there was-
either.
There was no mention of what
I
it's in
stuck it in
relation
here.
to. We got it from the Register of Deeds.
It's
Let's
so
make
funny,
sure
and then
everybody
it
correctly,
says,
now we have a sense.
I
of
hope
what
you
it is.
find this data to be timely, informative, and useful, and I'm like,
Yeah, I thought it went to everybody in
How did you get my
town.
address?
well, I figured it's the warrant committee.
We should add that to the record.
Yeah,
Yeah, we should
definitely.
have it on the record.
We could just make sure that
Sorry.
everybody has, just send it out, just to be sure that we have uniformity of information, if nothing else.
So basically, we have to enact a 1% surcharge to the real estate taxes. So we do have to increase our taxes just to then get a 35% reimbursement of our increases of taxes.
That's correct.
Okay, so we still have to collect more just to get a little bit more, and that 35% is
more.
restricted on what we can spend it on.
3 buckets, again, affordable
Yeah.
housing,
Right.
historic preservation, and open space.
Right, the nice thing is it doesn't turn into a piggy bank for somebody who is gonna do things we don't necessarily approve of. We know exactly what it's gonna be used for.
But you
Correct.
also stated that we could use it for the firehouses,
Historic
As a
preservation.
historical
any
Correct.
type of historic anything.
Yeah.
Correct.
Are schools considered historic?
So, I'm not sure, you may have you know, I don't know, I think the Historic Commission needs to make a determination on historic eligibility. Acquisition is also a big piece of it.
Acquisition, preservation, rehabilitation, restoration, that covers a lot of buckets.
Yeah.
It does, it does.
Gives some
And, you know,
latitude.
people can get really clever and creative about these projects. I love using this example, and I don't know how many people know about it, but the East Charles Gate over by the Fenway
Yeah.
Olmsted Park, the extension. They did a fantastic project in Boston. The CPA became the seed money, and now they've tapped into millions of additional dollars in resources to finish Olmsted's vision to connect it to the
Yeah.
Charles, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like, I think, an aspirational goal, but I think about Milton, and I think about kind of like the connections to the Greenway, the opportunity to look at, you know, more tree canopy expansion. I know that that's something that people are passionate about here, and also affordable housing, you know?
Any other questions? Allison, thank you very much. It's been very helpful. We're
Thank
grateful
you so
for
much
your-
for having
we're
us.
Grateful for your time. Our next item on the agenda is the presentation by Milton Hill Neighborhood Association. Brian, we're happy to have you come. Brian Bunn is going to address this from the perspective of the Milton Hill Neighborhood Association, the overlay district article that Cheryl Tugayas very kindly came and briefed us on at the last meeting. Brian, thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me. My name's Brian Bunn. I live at 139 Adams Street. As George mentioned, I'm the co-chair of the Milton Hill Neighborhood Association along with Forbes Sargent, who fortunately wasn't able to make it tonight. And I was planning to talk about the zoning a little bit. I'm happy to answer questions about how the neighborhood feels about it as well. I think as a general sense, as someone who's lived there for now 9 years and probably one of the more recent people on the street, people really do want to see some change in Milton Village. We've watched as Central Square has grown up with Hendry's and the Plate, and Steel and Rye. We've seen how East Milton Square has grown up. I know a lot of people don't want to change as much as other people, but a lot has changed. And then across into Dorchester and Lower Mills, there's been a lot of change there as well. Yet Milton Village has not changed at all since I've been there. And in fact, it's probably gone backwards a little bit. So I think there's definitely a need to do something and do something relatively soon. And I think the general sense of the neighborhood is that the zoning overlay is probably the best approach to this. There's certainly some concerns that I'll talk about in a minute, but I know that the implementation committee, as well as the planning board, has spent numerous hours, weeks, working on this, and want to thank them for all their work, and Cheryl and the rest of the members of the planning board. There are a lot of general concerns that the neighborhood has. A lot of it relates to the process as how we got here. There were lots, as I mentioned, lots of meetings. A lot of us attended those meetings. We spoke at those meetings, but there's a sense that we weren't necessarily heard at those meetings, and that the plan as it is right now doesn't necessarily reflect how the neighborhood feels about it. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend that you should only listen to the neighborhood, and the neighborhood's the only one that matters. I know the planning board has to take into account everybody in town and has to do what's best for the town as a whole. But given that we're the ones who live right around and in that area, I think it would be helpful to have some more of our input and take our input into account. As far as process goes, I know it was relatively late in the process where the folks on the board started speaking to actual developers who might be coming in to develop those properties. Up until fairly recently, that hadn't been done, and I think that would have been something that would have been very useful to do quite early to get a sense of, does this work for developers? The worst thing that we could see is to spend all this time and effort just to find out that no developers want anything to do with this. It doesn't work for them. If we'd only done this, if we'd only done that, it would be helpful. There has been some discussions about a working group with the neighborhood. Didn't really come to fruition, unfortunately. Would have liked to have seen that. I think a lot of the neighbors have not surprisingly, a lot to say about this. A lot of specific concerns, too, I'm happy to get into. I'm not even going to touch traffic. I know everyone thinks the traffic is the worst in their neighborhood, and we in Milton Hill are no different. Parking is a concern. I think there's a lot of concern that the minimum number of spaces allocated per unit is too small. The thought that there would be one parking spot or so per unit doesn't seem reasonable if you have two people living there. I know my wife and I both have cars. I take the T every single day, and yet on the weekend, I want my car. the encroachment and how it will impact High Street. For those of you who aren't aware, High Street's a relatively small street with some smaller historical homes, parallel to Adams Street, kind of behind kind of the Bank of America and Dolan Funeral Home that runs down there. Very nice historic areas. A lot of concerns about how the encroachment might impact that area. The height has become a concern. It's always been a general concern as to how tall these buildings could be. And more recently, we saw the current owner of what was the Dolan Funeral Home had publicized, I know they're marketing materials, but a very large building on the site of the Dolan Funeral Home up to 5 or 6 stories. And I completely understand that that wouldn't be permitted under the current zoning, but it did really make people think about what this could potentially look like. And, you know, to the extent that you're familiar with Milton Village, as you're coming down Adams Street, you hit Dolan Funeral Home, and then it really dips down quite a bit until you get down to the intersection with Elliott. And there's a lot of concern that as you come into the district, you might get hit with this big block of a building. And it really will impact how people view it, how the neighborhood views it, the beautiful views that people have, and as you drive into the district. And so I think that's become one of the areas that we've all been focused on most recently, more so on the, I guess, the west side, the left side as you're coming down the hill. The right side is pretty built up. You've got the Mason Building, you've got Verizon. I think it's really only the Citizens Bank and the Swift Hat Shop that's really available for rework there. But on the left side, you have a lot of buildings, and I think that's where it's most likely to be redeveloped. And so the thought is to try to impose some sort of height restrictions there, whether it's a shorter height restriction at the top of the hill, taller at the bottom, or more of a kind of a straight line approach where none of the buildings on that street can go above a certain height. So you try to maintain that kind of feel of coming down the hill. But, you know, overall, I think the plan works. I know these are probably relatively small issues, but issues that the neighborhood would like to see work through. I don't think there's any reason to rush this through. I think to take the time to do it right is probably worth it.
Questions?
Is your sense as the co-chair that the neighborhood is open and welcoming to development down there?
Very much so.
Okay.
I think, yeah, the reason that most of us moved there is that we wanted to be able to walk down and go to
Right.
restaurants. And
Right.
I often walk down into Dorchester. I walk right through Milton Village.
I
Don't even stop.
totally agree with you. And some of I mean, I don't live right there, but I live close enough that I frequent that area a lot. A lot of those places are currently eyesores to me. So, like the Swift Hat Shop, which I never even knew was a name of that red house that looks dilapidated. I don't even know. So, they're not opposed to the overlay, they're opposed more to some of the specifics within the overlay.
That's right.
And the process that happened. Well, the
That's
process that happened, and none of us, I'm sorry. Is there room for you to talk to the planning board, for the association to talk to the planning board about the height restriction? Because it
Always,
sounds to
certainly.
me like that might be the only sticking point.
It's certainly the big one.
It's the biggest. And can you remind me what the height is now? Is it 5? It's 4.
I think it's 3 with a bonus of 4, and the bonuses are quite easy to hit, so.
Yeah, that's what I
it's
thought.
4.
Okay, so it's 4 up. Okay.
Cheryl, we have the chair of the planning board here.
Part of that, just in terms of the accuracy of the height.
Yes,
Does she need to
Please
come
come.
up just so
yeah, please come.
it has to be
So we
recorded?
can get you into the microphone so we can all hear you.
I mean, I just want to just provide the answer to the question of the
Yeah.
height.
Cheryl Tugayas, chair of the planning board.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
The underlying zoning in the business districts allows for 45 feet in height in 3 stories, with under special permit to go to 55 feet and 4 stories. The overlay has 2 different heights. It allows 35 feet on High Street, so a drop in the height, and 45 on Adams Street with the bonus. And one of the reasons we went with these heights is that we wanted the overlay to be something that people would use. So if it went too low in changing it, then no one would apply under it because they would have their opportunity under the business zoning would be so much greater. So what the goal was to accommodate concerns about height, particularly on High Street, but where Adams Street is so much different scale, is to allow the greater height on Adams Street.
So with respect specifically to the site of the funeral home, Old Dolan Funeral Home, Chapman Cole and Gleason Funeral Home, what would be applicable there? Because it is intersection of High Street
Right.
and Adams Street
So the way,
and Canton Avenue.
so you only are allowed a bonus on Adams Street,
Adams.
and not allowed a bonus on High Street in the overlay? So that street, if measuring
From the
the
grade.
Adams Street section of that, could be 45 there, but still only 35 on High.
Because it'd be high.
So as the grade goes around and goes up, it transitions from 45 to 35 because the slope of the land goes high. So, but where the height is measured for the 45 is on Adams Street at the sidewalk level. So there's been some question that has come up at the planning board meeting, is it measured up at the top of the retaining wall where the parking is? No.
Right.
It's measured
At grade.
at the sidewalk level of the grade. And it's an average, again, because it slopes like this, right?
Yeah,
Even
yeah.
Adams Street, so you're measuring it here, you're not measuring it here, and you're not measuring it here.
So theoretically, if somebody wanted to put something very creative there and take advantage of the maximum benefit of the heights, they could put a ziggurat-like thing, Neo-Babylonian architecture there to accommodate this, and that would be okay.
So
according to the
it's all,
zoning
it's all,
regulations.
again, at the discretion of the planning board, so none of these are guaranteed.
Right.
So it's a special permit process.
All right.
So the underlying zoning is an as of right, no special permit required in the business district, but the overlay, it's a special permit process, and the planning board has discretion to deny. So if the design came through that we didn't feel met the design standards, when there's a lot of design standards that
In
relate
conformity
to
with the
scale.
neighborhood and things like that?
Yeah, and
right.
there's specific setback and step-back requirements to adjust to scale.
Yeah.
So if those aren't made, the planning board can deny.
And how many residents, I don't know which one of you to ask this, but how many residents live on High Street?
Well, I'm not certain, there's a couple of
Yeah.
single families and there's a few two families.
Yeah, I would
Okay.
think that's like a dozen families,
So
maybe.
a dozen families.
I mean, it's significant.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the other thing is the two families, they're what's considered pre-existing non-conforming. You're allowed business uses in the business district and single families or single families, but not the combination of both on a parcel. And you're not allowed two families in the district. So those are allowed to remain because they existed before
Grandfathered.
zoning. Actually, everything there existed before zoning,
Right, right.
so
So
nothing
it's all
meets
grandfathered
zoning,
in
nothing
theoretically,
meets
yes,
the
yeah.
zoning, either existing zoning, particularly for parking, where, like, the Masonic building would be, that building under the current zoning would be required to provide over 100 parking spaces. That building's been there a long time, and I think they have 14 parking spaces. So there's a lot of discussion about parking, and I can come back and talk to you about that. I just want to make sure I answered the question,
Thank
though,
you.
about the
That's very-
height.
That's very helpful. Brian, have you anything more you want to share with us?
No, I'm all set.
Okay, any questions, any further questions? Because I do want to make sure that we have the concerns of the neighborhood association reflected in whatever commentary we put together. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have now to discuss the schedule for our warrant articles. I think, given the fact that we're going to have some revisions to the budget, the individual budget items, we will, I think, have the information we need to have a majority of the votes taken at our next meeting, which will be on the 2nd of March. A third, is it? No, it's the 2nd is that Monday, right?
Yep.
Right. So March 2nd, which will be a comprehensive taking of the votes and assignment of the recommendations that have to be written for the warrant report itself, which would have to be completed within about 10 days, because it has to go to the printer on the, according to our schedule, it goes to the printer on Friday the 13th, lucky day. So we would expect to have the articles voted by the 2nd and the comments in the following week, which would be the 9th at the absolute latest. And then it would go to the printer, it goes through all the reviews that we have to go through in order to get everything approved, et cetera, reviewed, make sure there are no typos, et cetera, et cetera. So the next meeting will be very important, so if those of you who are able to make it can be here, which I hope is everybody, or as many of us as can be here. I know a couple of you will be away, but the majority of the group will be seconded to write the recommendations that will have to go out to the town meeting. And if there's any other discussion point that we have to bring up, please don't hesitate to bring it to our attention between now and then, and we'll have the appropriate group here to answer the question if necessary. So,
I have a substantive question about something we talked about earlier, but I don't know if we.
it's perfect,
Over
it's
that.
fine, I'm done.
One of the warrant articles concerned the prudent investor rule.
Yes.
And I do remember that we discussed that last
At length.
session. I can't remember why we didn't recommend it, or whether we did and it was voted down. I don't remember the institutional history.
voted down.
I think
It
it
was
was
voted down at
voted
town
down.
meeting.
It was voted down.
It was
Okay.
about, it was
Yeah.
all over Milton Neighbors.
Okay.
It was
Right.
voted down at the town meeting. We approved it.
Yep.
Right. Do people remember what the discussion was at town meeting and why it was voted down? And whether it had to do with the treasurer vote or anything like that?
I think it was tied to that, but my sense is that there was a thought that there was too much discretion being given without parameters, because there was no policy, and that was the issue, I think. If you're gonna write it to reflect a policy that's in place, that's great.
Yeah.
But, giving the cash and then shoehorning in the policy after that was looked to be a cart before the horse sort of a thing.
I think it would be worthwhile to dig up whatever our comment was from that warrant article and to think about what we should be thinking about with regard to town meeting to the extent we want to make a recommendation. And
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yes, I think that's wise. In fact, I was looking to see if I had that copy of the annual meeting. I think that's the only one I don't have, unfortunately.
I can send that out.
But I wonder, did
Go ahead.
they say that they changed it from last year?
There,
They changed the list, correct, from last
so
year?
I don't
From the
remember.
Fortune 20 to the Fortune 100,
That's what I thought.
and that's an expansion. It's an okay expansion, but again, it's very limiting. I mean, if you're going to have an asset allocation model that's going to reflect reality, the S&P 100 is great. It's extremely conservative as an
Right.
equity investor, because you're basically looking at large cap stocks. I mean, the largest cap stocks.
But I think their option one was meant to address, I think, that, to give them more flexibility.
Right, but then the flip side of that is, what was that flexibility going to be? And was it going to be too flexible to the point where you could either leave it in the mattress or you could take it to Foxwoods?
Well, no, because I think that's actually limited
Not
by
on
Mass General law.
Understood, but I mean, I'm exaggerating, obviously, but the point is that it would be nice to see a policy before the money was allocated. That's my sense anyway, but,
And Mr. Chair, in combination with this, have we heard anything about the treasurer vote again?
nothing,
Nothing.
nothing at all. I think that one is going to wait for the dust to settle and then be revised. I think some of the things that have been brought up at the town meeting actually were quite interesting, because one of the distinguished members of the town meeting, who had been on several of the boards and elected to a couple of positions, had expressed great interest in seeing a 5-year plan developed by the town, which
Agreed.
most businesses have. They have long-term
Yes.
plans, either 2-year, 3, or 5-year. Some even go out 10 years, which I give a lot of credit to, because I think that's very brave to project what you're going to look like in 10 years. But 5 years is certainly very reasonable. And, I mean, those of us who have gone through business training are used to doing 5 years of projections. And some of us even having done it before there were programs that did it on a computer, so you had to know the ratios. But the reality is that having that in place, you have a sense of how you can plan and what you're going to need. I mean, here we look at a town that has the need to build 3 fire stations, and we're looking at a $50 million school project, potentially, in addition to the operating costs that are going to be attendant with these new developments. And we have basically a very stable but static residential tax base, which is only going to increase revenues by 1% to 2% a year. And it's very difficult to justify how the town is going to be able to manage the growth and these expenses and these capital outlays, because, yeah, sure, we can borrow the money, but that's going to add to debt service, and then you still have the operating component that's going to become a permanent part of the budget going forward. So no matter how you slice it, a 5-year plan is going to be essential, and in some respects, it might not look that pretty if we have to hit all these expensive and we don't have alternative sources of revenue, because we can't, I think, really rely on the governor to come through with late Christmas presents every year.
Well, I'll just make one comment to that, and I know we're beyond sort of the substance of the agenda, but I don't disagree with the idea that there should be some sort of long-term projection about what the potential expenses are going to be for the town, or what the known expenses are going to be. The difficulty that the town has, that we've run across year after year, is that there are there are variables that the town really has difficulty controlling. One of them has to do with health insurance for contract employees, another has to do with contracts that are up, like for example with DPW, and then another has to do with what's the state aid that's going to be provided. And so I think that to the extent we're going to ask for, to the extent that that is a discussion, an ongoing discussion in the town, I'm persuaded by the idea that 5 years might frankly be unrealistic, but I'm also persuaded by the idea that the plan has got to be a little bit more limited than what we might expect out of a business.
I don't disagree. And there are other variables that have been brought forward, particularly when we're talking about the school building committee, there's a whole algorithm that they explained in their last presentation of how they arrive at what the school population is. One of the key variables is who moves into town and how many kids do they have that they're sending to school. That's a total unknowable. And there's the random element, one of the random elements. So your point is very, very well taken. I think, though, that if there is some gesture in the direction of planning, it would be helpful. We can't, it's not an exact science, we know that. And financial projection never can be an exact science. But to have some sense of what to expect, what operating expenses we know are going to have, and what capital needs are going to happen, new roofs for the schools, new furnaces, new floors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, how much you're going to spend on paving annually, that can be guesstimated pretty closely, I think. We've looked at that before. So going out 2 to 3 years, I think, is pretty reasonable. If you want to go 5 years, yeah, okay, maybe you're taking a little bit of a leap of faith, but I don't think it's a bad exercise to have, and it might even inject some fiscal discipline into our process.
And on that same note, though, that dovetails with the planning board, because I caught wind somewhere, and I didn't honestly read the article, but that there's 255 units that are about to come online here in Milton. That's going to impact so many of our... What?
For the Milton Times.
Was it in the Milton Times? So that's going to impact, but that's part of the planning board that can be talked about with the treasurer as we plan for what is going to be needed, because those are things, Chris, that we actually do have a record of. So I just want to push back a little bit on that and say it would be really nice to see something.
So one thing that I will also say is that in the report of the chair to the town meeting, clearly elements that I will bring forward are many issues that we've already discussed, which includes the need for the strategic plan, the actual reconsideration that the town should make for a chief financial officer who will be invested specifically with that. A treasurer is a different role than a chief financial officer. We have had and have chief financial officers as members of this committee, and their role is very different than what a chief accountant would be or a treasurer would be. And to look forward to the actual needs of the schools in an extremely pragmatic way, and to look for creative alternatives that might exist for a new school, et cetera, et cetera. To the extent that these are going to be considerations that the town meeting has to look at now or next year, it's all a piece of the same cloth. There's a limited revenue base, and the expenses very easily could really, I don't want to say spiral out of control, but they could you know, they could increase significantly over the next 2 years with very little effort, because we're already looking at spending on the firehouses and potential for the school building program. So I think that there are plenty of things for us to talk about. For our purposes, though, I would just ask those of you who have been involved in the budget discussions with the individual departments to think about how you want to construct the recommendations for those individual articles, because we'll assign these 8 and the planning board articles, the 3 planning board articles, to be drafted as well, and we're going to have to move on those very quickly. So that's what we have before us. This is crunch time. I thank you all very much for the work you've already put in. We're almost there, a little more and we'll be done. So if there is no new business, the chair will ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We have a second. Very good, thank you. Next meeting, March 2nd at 7. I think it'll be at the town hall, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're back at the town hall. Okay, thank you all very much.